Elizabeth Chappell, a lifelong entrepreneur who finally found my niche. After years of new ideas and jumping from business to business, I figured out how to turn a craft into a successful career. In 2016, I started a monthly subscription box for quilters. That little startup has grown into a thriving, multiple six-figure business that I am so proud of. As a published author, designer of fabrics and patterns being sold throughout the world, my favorite thing to do is to teach others how to grow a career of their dreams. Each week, you'll hear from me or from other guests who are creative entrepreneurs, so you can learn exactly what to do and what not to do to grow a career that's more rewarding and successful than you ever thought possible. If you're ready to turn your craft into a career that you love, I am so excited you're here. Welcome to the Craft to Career podcast. You are in for a treat today. We have Bonnie Christine as the guest on the podcast. And I actually took Bonnie Christine's pattern writing, her surface pattern design course, Immersion, in 2018. It was the very first year that she ever launched the course. And this, for me, was a breakthrough moment in my career. It was a time where I looked at this business model. I mean, I learned so much from her course, but I just looked at the business model that Bonnie was running, and it has changed my career and trajectory. And then if you've been a listener to the podcast, you know, and if you haven't, I'll share. I did design fabric. This was a dream of mine from the moment I learned that that was a thing, which was only a couple of years ago. And so I struggled. I really struggled. I tried to learn Adobe. I was just so frustrated with why do I see these fabrics that look amazing and these prints, and I'm over here making like a square? I cannot, there's a huge gap here and I can't figure it out. And it was when I took Bonnie Christine's course that I was finally able to create the designs that I wanted to. And so her course has changed my career on so many levels. And I have a couple of episodes, podcast episodes, one where I share my journey of becoming a fabric designer. And then recently I stepped away. And what's been very, very interesting to me was when I shared my podcast episode on why I decided not to design fabric for art gallery fabrics. How many people have reached out to me and said, thank you for sharing that. And when I heard that, I realized I want to design fabric. And I'm so glad, because my goal is never to tell people you should do exactly what I'm doing. You should follow in my footsteps. My goal is for each of you listeners to tap into what's in your heart, what is in your path, your future, and no one's will look the same. And so I know that many people in my audience are very interested in designing fabric and becoming a surface pattern designer. Now, as a surface pattern designer, you can design fabric, but you can also design so many other things. I mean, you can use those same designs that you use to create fabric to also create wallpaper, notebooks, shirts, puzzles. I mean, anything that has a print on it, you can design that. And so Bonnie opens her signature course once a year, and I am an affiliate for her course. As someone who has gone through her course and who has seen the quality of her course, that her content has completely shifted my career. I use the skills that I learned in her course to write my quilt patterns. I now teach a course on how to write quilt patterns using Adobe. It has completely changed everything for me. So if this is a course that you are interested in signing up for, please visit my show notes. I have an affiliate link where you can sign up to take Bonnie's course. And you'll hear in this episode, she has a free introductory course that I highly recommend that you sign up for. Again, use my affiliate link for that, and I'll share why in a moment. You can take her free course and see if this is for you, if this is what you're interested in. And then if it is, go ahead and take her signature course, which is amazing. It's not just a course, it's an experience. And the things that come with it, like her workbook that she's created and the keyboard, there's stickers you can put on your keyboard. I mean, it's phenomenal. Now, if you sign up using my affiliate link, I will be offering a one-on-one coaching call with everyone who signs up for her course. You and I get to go on a coaching call together, and you can ask me your questions. It's a 1-hour coaching call, and we can use that however you want to use that coaching session. So don't hesitate to use that affiliate code, because that is a really great bonus that I don't offer anywhere else. And that's just something that you get when you sign up with my affiliate link. So let's dive in. I cannot wait for you to meet Bonnie. And I did ask some questions that have really been on my mind that I'm excited for you to hear as well. And without further ado, let's go in and have you meet Bonnie. Bonnie, thank you so much for being here. This is truly a pleasure. You're such like my inspiration of how I started with everything. For our listeners, can you just introduce us first to what surface pattern design is, specifically for quilters? What would that look like in the quilting world?
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I adore you. So this big, beautiful industry called surface design, I will never forget the moment that I realized what it was, because it was like right in front of me all this time, and yet I never knew it existed. So for me specifically, I wanted to be a fabric designer, and the fabric design industry is a part of a larger industry called surface design. So surface design is anytime you have artwork on a surface. So walk into any store, Anthropologie, Target, look at all the products with all the artwork on them. That's surface design. And then surface pattern design is this big, beautiful industry underneath that, which is artwork in repeat patterns for products like fabric and wallpaper and gift wrap and tape and ribbon, right? And so fabric design is yet another kind of industry underneath that umbrella. And it is a huge part of that fabric design industry is the quilt market, the quilting industry, which is really where I come from. So grew up in my mom's quilt shop, started working there after college. And part of my job was to meet with reps and decide on the collections that we were going to carry for the season. And that is the moment that it hit me one day when I was like, oh my goodness, there's somebody behind every single one of these fabric designs. Could that possibly be me?
Which is awesome. I'm wondering if you can rewind. There's a story that you shared once, and I'd love to hear it. This was back in the very beginning of your business. Probably you were working at your mom's quilt shop, but you were married and you went on a bike tour with your husband, and someone asked you about your blog and how you monetized it. And this was like a moment for you. Can you share that story?
I sure can. You're close to the details. This was one of, like, when I look back and I look at turning points in my business, there's a handful, and this is one of them. And I was newly married. It was before we had children, and my husband was a cycling coach. And so if you know that kind of industry, he was a coach for endurance athletes. And so sometimes he had really successful athletes that he would work for. And so this was in our era of being newlywed on very low income. And he had this one client who was the wealthiest man that I had ever known in my life. And at the time, they would bring me along for these cycling coaching trips and have me drive what they call SAG. Okay, so SAG is when you drive a car behind the cyclist and you have like spare tires and extra food. And so often they would be doing 100-mile trips, which is why they needed the extra support. And also we would have to drive a long way, right, to get to where they were going to start, or they would have rode 100 miles and we had to drive back. So all to say, we had a lot of car time to talk. And so I just got this incredibly wise businessman to be able to pour into me. And I was entrepreneurial, but I was so young. I didn't know what I was doing. And so I really, like, he was a mentor to me. And so I would ask him questions. So that's where we're at. That's the story. And at the time, this was like 2010, when everyone was blogging. I had a blog, and I had a successful blog, and I was kind of telling him, I have like 6,000 daily readers and it's all very impressive. And he's like, well, how much revenue does that equate to? And I'm like, oh, well, like, I don't know, $200 a month by like my ads in the sidebar. And he's like, well, okay, that's not very impressive. So what could you do to get like a small percentage of people to pay you for anything? And it just got my gears turning. It was the very first time that I had someone explain to me residual income, which is when you do the work once and get paid for it over and over and over again. Also, like, think about, waking up to having earned income while you were sleeping kind of idea. And so that particular conversation led me to launch my membership, which was $5 a month. And it was really a paid newsletter at the time. But the same conversation was like, well, what I really want to do is license my artwork. And he said, well, tell me more about that. And I explained it to him. And he said, that's what you want to focus on, because it's all based on royalties and percentages, right? So when you license your work, you get paid a royalty based on how many times that work gets sold on the product, which means that for me today, at the time, that was about maybe 2 years before I had my first licensing contract, but I was headed in that direction. And so now today, like, I'm still earning revenue and royalties off of artwork that I designed 10 years ago. And so it's a really beautiful revenue stream for artists and creatives. And it all really stemmed from that story.
Which is amazing. I'm curious, the artwork that you're still earning revenue from that you created 10 years ago, do you feel like you're still earning revenue because you've been consistent and you're growing a brand over time? What is helping that to stay relevant, and to keep growing?
Well, the beauty of that industry, right, is that you can also take the artwork and license it across multiple industries. So I typically start everything in the fabric industry, but based on how contracts work, you can typically license the same artwork across other industries like home decor and kitchen textiles and things like that as well, wallpaper. And so once you kind of get things dispersed and spread out, then one piece of artwork can really go to work for you. And so that's a large part of it and also just the fact that there are products still being sold with the art on them. And so there is a way to kind of layer it and also continue to do more work, right? So you continually do more work, building your portfolio, which just means that you have more available for licensing.
Which, okay, a lot of my listeners are very interested in surface pattern design. So they are quilterpreneurs in one way or another. And I talk a lot about diversifying their income. So you've touched on this. Can you talk more about the importance of diversifying your income? And then we're going to dive into how to avoid burnout. So let's first talk about diversifying your income.
Okay. So diversifying your income, super important, right? The more revenue streams you can have working in your business, the better. I think I was just writing this article on long-term success in surface design. And I would say the tagline for that is the ability to pivot, right? So you want to be able to have more than one revenue stream so that if something happens or one kind of ebbs, right, you can turn on another one or pour all of your effort into one that you have established but is working differently. A great example of this is what happened in 2020 when I had friends who had the majority of their business in wholesale product and every store across the nation shut down. And the ones that made it quickly pivoted to an online version of, let's say, I know someone who did like a pen pal version of their cards. They ended up having all these cards available because it wasn't going into retail anymore. And so they launched a pen pal virtual membership, not virtual, but online membership. So that's the kind of thing that you want to keep in the back of your mind, is like just the ability to pivot. And the more revenue streams that you have, the better. This is a topic that we're going to be diving into in the Pattern Design Playbook workshop that I'm sure we'll talk about more. Lesson 4 is the 15 different revenue streams that artists use to create income from their artwork.
Awesome. Beautiful and so relevant, especially now in the quilt pattern world. I hear this fear of artificial intelligence and like, what if they take over our jobs? What will we do? And I feel confident, I'm sure you do too, of like, we actually don't need to know. Like as things come, we just are creative and scrappy. And there's probably jobs that will come that we can't even think of right now, but we'll pivot, we'll learn. And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's two different types of people, right? The person who can pivot and the person who can't. And you want to be the type that can pivot. Your creativity is really all you need. It's your biggest superpower. It's endless. It's there. It will always be needed. It will always be used, and it will always be able to be used to earn yourself income. We just might not know what it's always going to look like, and that's okay.
Which, okay, this reminds me too. And you are so organically you, like you, even the wallpaper behind you that our viewers can't see, but it's like plants and floral. You really tap into, and I know you talk about this in your course, but how do you teach people to tap into that individuality and to bring that out, to stand out in a crowd? Like, talk about the power of that and how they do that.
Well, I think there's two different ways to be successful, and I see them both. And I genuinely believe that both ways are 100% beautiful and gorgeous. You just have to decide which one feels like you. One of them is to follow trends, and one of them is kind of not to follow trends. So we'll talk about that. One of them is if you find yourself loving kind of like a brief, like a guideline, like design me llamas or design me butterflies, and you have like rails on the project at hand, you might love to design to trends, which means that you see a trend, you design to it, it sells. The other way is if those rails, the brief, if you will, if it feels stifling, like don't tell me what to do, then you might, which is kind of where I land, right? Like I want complete creative freedom. And the way that that comes out is kind of my motto, which is to create the beauty that you want to see come alive in the world. And that means like, what do you want to see come alive? Like take influence and trends away and put yourself in a room with no influence. What is it that you want to see brought to life? And that's what is made possible by surface design. And then there's something that comes out. It's kind of like you design what you want to see, and then you see if anyone else is interested in it. And they may or may not, but it's worked out for me and for many other people as well. And it means that the work that you bring to the table is just really uniquely you. It's undeniably you. It's not trendy, but it's timeless. So it still works and it tests the length of time. So again, that sounds like I'm opinionated, and I'm not, because so many students, like we really need the other sector as well to really work to what's working right now today. And so there's just two different types, I think, of people who like to come to a project. Do you want complete creative freedom, or does that feel overwhelming? You would rather work to a brief. There's two different ways to go about it.
I really love that, which also leads me to ask, I hear a lot of people say, I could never be a surface pattern designer because I'm not a good artist. Yeah. So speak to me about that.
Well, I wasn't either. Hi, it's me. I was not an artist. I would have said that I was creative. I would have probably said that I was crafty. I loved kind of crafting. I loved anything that involved creativity. And so I knew I had that. I liked playing with kind of composition and color, but I was not an artist, and I didn't have like a regular art practice. So learning how to draw and manipulate was part of my learning process. So if that's you, you're fine. It's totally fine. If you are an artist and you've got a skill set already in drawing or sketching or painting, then the road is kind of pre-paved for you. So go and run with it. But if you don't, there are so many different ways to develop that skill. There's also many, many different pieces of art that I've licensed that didn't actually require drawing at all. It was like maybe something I found, like a fern that I scanned in and used to create the print from. It's a lot of maybe mark making, which any of us can do. But it all comes down to your style, right? Do you want to be like, there massively successful fabric designers and surface designers who are known for their scribbles or the way that they approach, making marks with paint or whatever. So there's a million different ways to do it. And part of the fun is figuring out your way.
Okay, I'm curious. When I started designing fabric, in my mind, it was going to look a certain way. But as I drew and created, it was coming out another way. And I was like, well, I guess we're going this way. So does that happen with you in your creative process? You're like, oh, nope, this is going a way different direction than I thought it was.
For sure. And every single time. So I like to call that the gap, right? There is a gap between what you envision it to look like and what it's actually looking like. And you can kind of cross that bridge. You can kind of close the gap, but it takes time. And I would say that that's probably the biggest kind of mistake that I see people make is they get frustrated at how long it's taking to close that gap. And they quit. But the bridge is worth traveling across. And the journey is really like loving that process is one of the most important pieces because you have to fall in love with all of it, with playing with new approaches to different techniques, to making work that you don't like, to finally making work that you're like, hey, okay, I see something there. I see something there that I like. I see a consistency between that piece and that piece. And then finally, you kind of, maybe you do end up, I still end up making work that's different than what I envisioned. And also I love it. And so there's just a journey to be had there. And there's one that's worth taking. It's enriching. It's life-giving. It's joy-giving. It's very much calling you into the moment where, as I feel like we're in this whirlwind of a high-tech world, this is not fast. We love fast food and we also really love slow food. Like you can immediately tell and taste the difference when you grew the vegetable yourself or you got it from the farmer's market and then you washed it and chopped it at home and then you cooked it in a particular way and it was longer and then you plated it and you sat down to a meal. That's completely different. And so there's something there to be savored. There's something there to be enjoyed, and it's worth the time that it takes to do it.
Absolutely. I love that analogy with food. What a beautiful and delicious analogy. I am curious for you. You've been teaching. I was in the very first course, so 2018, right? That's when you first started offering your surface pattern design.
You like my baby. Yeah.
I know. It was very special. I'm really honored that I got to do that. But okay, so point is you've been doing this for a lot of years. For the listener who's like, is this course for me? What have you found to be patterns of success for people who've taken your course? If you're like, if you have this mindset, you have this tendency, then yes, like this, do this,
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about this in two different ways. One is the type of person, and two is the action that they take. Okay. First, the type of person, I will go back and say general creative. So there is no need to already feel like you're an artist. And also, if you are an artist, you're great. And so that creative indicator, right, is like, you're crafty, whatever. You, just like me, before you whip out your credit card, you're like, I think I could make that. And if that's you, before you start buying things at any home decor store, if you're like, I could make that, then lean in because it really translates to this really beautifully. And so we have a lot of like laser cutting people that are in our audience who kind of dip their toes into surface design through having a Cricut or a Silhouette or a Glowforge. We have a lot of sewers, right? So eventually you realize that you could also be the one to design the fabric, which takes your craft to an entirely different level. We have a lot of moms who want to be able to design for their children the exact thing that they want. And it's also a beautiful, I'm getting off track here, but right, it's also like beautifully flexible because the point is you can do it from anywhere, at home, from anywhere in the world, which is really fulfilling for so many women in particular. So the thing that I see though, that if you have that, you have to marry it with the willingness to just come to the work. And so the consistency, the habit creation of coming to the work every single day is the requirement for long-term success. And when I say come to the work, I mean 15 minutes a day is all I would ask for to continually just come to it. And the work is going to look differently. Sometimes it might be a blank piece of paper you need to fill in with mark making. Some days it may be taking the lesson. Some days it may be learning Illustrator. Other days it will be gathering inspiration. Then it'll move on to portfolio making, and then it'll be on to emailing companies your work to see what they think about it. It doesn't really matter, but it's a willingness to just come to it every single day. And so it's more than just the time that accumulates with that. It's the habit of prioritizing the dream, the goal, the working towards the goal that bakes in momentum that is unstoppable. And it's the momentum that you need, because even if you've only actually done 15 minutes that day, subconsciously, you've got everything in your world moving you towards accomplishing that goal. And so there's a lot that happens when you just prioritize your willingness to come to it day after day after day. And we've all got 15 minutes. We're just doing something else with it currently, right? So like 15 minutes counts. Just come to it day after day.
And now, okay, I'm going to ask you more of a personal question, but how have you become so disciplined? And are you as disciplined as I think? In my mind, you wake up at 5 a.m., you're just so no, I know better. You've posted a day in the life and you don't. You like your sleep. I forgot this. So yeah, you like your sleep.
I like this version of myself.
Yeah. But I mean, and I've recently gone through like a year of burnout. So I really would love to hear any tips you have on avoiding burnout, because all these people that I see who are so successful, they all seem to like have their diet under control, and they're very good at exercising, and they're very disciplined. I'm like, there is a correlation, but just speak to that. If someone is like, I don't know if I've got that in me, myself included sometimes, like, is there hope for us? What guidance, avoiding burnout? Do we have to be a robot that can, do all the things?
Wow.
That's a lot right there.
This is something I could talk about forever. I am endlessly fascinated by it. I am so undisciplined that my word of the year last year was discipline.
Wow. Okay.
And also everyone's surprised by that. Like, I am disciplined for sure. And I always feel like I could be so much more disciplined. So sleep is a big one. And like, people ask me if I'm a night owl or a morning person, and I'm like, neither. I want to go to bed early and sleep in. So I love getting 9+ hours of sleep a night. And I think it's part of my superpower. I'm super disciplined and getting enough sleep. And also, to put that into perspective, I'm getting up at 6:30 every morning on a school day, right? But give me a weekend and I love it. So there is parts of the discipline that I think are really important. So for me, it is health. It doesn't have to be for everyone, but it has been, I think, an indicator of my success has been prioritizing wellness. And so I work out every day. It's the first thing that I do. And I trip up over it sometimes because I think that's the perfect time to get the head, my brain is firing. And so it really feels like a better time to work. But if I leave it, then I don't get to it. And so I just prioritize it. I do it at 8:30 in the morning, and it does something for the mind. Man, it just clears it and helps you feel kind of strong and capable throughout the rest of the day. It's also a time for me that I don't think about business. And I don't know about you, Elizabeth, but entrepreneurs are just kind of geared towards always being in the business. And so it's really just a gift to myself to exit the thinking for a minute. And then I think that what I've gotten really good at is actually prioritizing what actually is important. And so one of our pitfalls as creative entrepreneurs is that everything feels equally important. And that's not actually the case. We have too much to do. We're never done. There's always more that we could do. And so because of that, we have to get really good at identifying what actually moves the needle. And so just because something is due today, right, or someone has requested something today, we often let that indicate the priority. But it's not always true, right? Because if it doesn't actually move the needle on what I actually want to move the needle on, it's not a priority. So there's some adjusting to be done there. There's also things to watch about ourselves. Like we love to start with the easiest tasks because checking them off feels really good. But then we've left the most difficult tasks for when our brain and energy are at their lowest. And so there is some self-discipline that has to be figured out in there to do the most important task and match it to your brain's most fiery time so that when you put your head to bed at night, you feel accomplished. So that's been a long journey. I don't think that comes easy. And also it's just kind of possible.
Okay. So it is possible. Okay. 2 last questions, this one, and then tie it in a bow question. How many productive hours do you feel like you have in a day, realistically, where you're like, I am in the zone and I'm on fire?
Yeah. So I don't often get up really early, but I do have to say that when I do, it's some of my best work and I will fall in love with it and then get tired. So,
Yeah.
so on a typical day, Elizabeth, I work from 10 to 5. I work from 10 to 5. So I don't know, how is that? 7 hours a day times 5. So that's pretty much a standard day. Sometimes I cut it down to 4:00. Sometimes I take the day off. Sometimes I add a Saturday. Like it's all over the place with the way that life is, but it is flexible, right?
I am motivated to, really though, a solid, what do we say, 7 hours? That's a lot of productive time during a day. So it really does take work to be successful. It's not just like, oh, I took a course and so now I will have success, but you have to put in the time and there is dedication that, to be realistic about that.
Yeah. And when I think about earlier times, part of the struggle was kind of onboarding people, like I'm working. And for me, I was just at home. And so it looked like I was just at home. And then there was some time where it looked like I was maybe a stay-at-home mom. And that feels easy to interrupt, right? Like, come have lunch. I don't know, it feels easy to interrupt someone when that looks like what you're doing. And so there was some time where I had to kind of train my people. Like, I know I'm at home, but I am on a mission. And so this is my mission work time, and it is not to be interrupted for anything other than an emergency. And so once you start taking yourself seriously, other people will too. And if you don't take yourself seriously, if you're wishy-washy and you're in your PJs still at 1 p.m., people will not take you as seriously. And so that was a lesson I learned the hard way as well. Like it looks like I'm at home, but man, I got to get up, get myself ready, look, not professional, but, look like I didn't just roll out of bed and get to work.
Yeah, that is true. As one who works from home, I can tell the difference when I get up and get dressed and get ready for the day versus like, oh, we'll just have a slow day. It transcends. So final question that I'd love to, wrap it with a bow. I think this is 2 questions in one. Okay. So what big tip for success would you have for someone who's like, I just would love to grow a creative career? And then to end it, if you can just tell us a bit about your course that's opening up that is coming soon.
Okay. Well, you have to honor that like itch, that inkling that you were made to use your creativity. I think my biggest goal, like my mission in life at this point, is that people love what they do for a living. And that may or may not be surface pattern design, but if it's interesting, you owe it to yourself to try to consider it, because we ought to just enjoy what we do for a living, meaning it ought to get you out of bed in the morning. You love it so much. You ought to feel bad calling it work or a job because you love it that much. And so if surface design or fabric design has that piqued your curiosity, just consider it. And so the best way to do that is through the workshop that I have coming up, which is before the immersion course. So Elizabeth, you took the immersion course. Before that, I host a workshop. And this workshop, my goal is to leave you knowing beyond a shadow of a doubt if this is what you want to try or not. And so the workshop is completely free. And in and of itself, it is meant to deliver insane value. So what the workshop is it's a week long. It's February 10th through the 19th. It's 4 lessons, and then there's some live sessions in between that you can come to chat with me and ask questions and that kind of thing. So the first lesson is called Pattern Possibilities, and we scratched the surface today, but it really lays out like what this is and what does it make possible for you. The next lesson is your pattern progress. And so this is the first year I'm doing this. I'm so excited about it. I'm going to have you map out your first pattern collection. So you don't have to make any art. You don't have to use the computer. It's super simple, but it's going to give you a taste as to what it would actually feel like and look like to be a pattern designer. So I walk you through my 5-step process of mapping out what you think your first collection would be about, and it's super fun. Lesson number 3 is called Your Pattern Path, and I think that this is probably the biggest gift I could give anyone. It takes all of the wondering out of this scenario. And so I spent months and months in overwhelm, not understanding what this looked like. And so in this lesson, what we do is kind of take you where you are, where you want to go. If that is to be a fabric designer or finish a portfolio or open your own print on demand shop, whatever it is. And we break it down into very, very specific milestones and action steps that would have to be true for you to meet that goal. And so it just takes the wondering out of what the process looks like. We're going to map it all out so that you can see exactly what this would entail to meet your goal. And then you get to walk away figuring out whether you want to get started on it or not. And then lesson 4 is probably everyone's favorite. It's called Pattern Profits. And that's where I break down the 15 different revenue streams that artists use to make income from their artwork. So it's entirely free and it's going to be incredibly fun. And we're also like doing all this fun stuff, Elizabeth. I'm sharing 7 secrets to success throughout the workshop, and you collect them along the way. And if you collect them, you get to enter to win over $5,000 worth of giveaways that we're doing. So we've made it a lot of fun, but also really clarifying for people. So that's what I would suggest.
And I just have to tell my listeners, what an amazing job you do. Like your course, the free, anything that you do is magical. Even this, like we have these hidden 7. I'm like, of course you do. It's just beautiful. The things you do are just magical. I would love to be inside your brain as you're creating these things. But if you're listening, you must go. If you have any sort of like, could I, maybe do the free course. You'll love it and you'll find so much value from that. And then you can decide if this is the path that you want to pursue or not. So yeah, thank you so much for being a guest, Bonnie. This has been such a pleasure. For our listeners, if they want to find you, where's the best place to go?
Well, I'm Bonnie Christine at all the places online, bonniechristine.com, on Instagram, and I am over at the Professional Creative Podcast.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Wow. What a fun conversation. I know that my listeners enjoyed that as much as I did. There was a lot of really fun conversation and it really left me motivated, which I hope it did for you too. Even if, surface pattern design, if you're not interested, there was so much in this episode as a business owner to glean and to really be inspired with. And if you are interested in surface pattern design, even just curious about it, use my affiliate link again in the show notes and go ahead and sign up for Bonnie's free course. It's, as you heard, it's a couple of days. She's going to be recording that. So if you can't make it live, that's okay. Fun prizes, that's always a fun bonus, but really just to learn about the potential, the career of surface pattern design and what that could look like for you. Again, this is something that has been truly pivotal in my life and in my career, and it has shaped how I run my business and what I offer in my business. So if that's something that you're interested in, go and take a look. And Bonnie, thank you so much for being a guest here on the podcast. Truly an honor to have my mentor here sharing and answering questions. And if you listeners are enjoying the podcast, be sure to subscribe to the podcast. You'll get notified whenever there is a brand new episode. And if you've not left a review, please take just a moment to do that. It really is so meaningful and really can help the podcast to continue to thrive and for me to show up. So thank you again so much for being here, listeners. I hope you have a wonderful week. We'll see you next week.